Now we have finished discussing the prophets and the messengers and what they bring. It is wahi. Wahi, or it is naqal. We say naqal. Naqal means that which is being transmitted. On this side, we have another group of people, and we will call them the philosophers. Right? The philosophers. And specifically, I mean the Greek philosophers. Right? These are people like Plato and Aristotle. You've probably heard of these people, and they are taught in the schools and so on and so forth. And this is crucial to understand because we want to contrast between the prophets and messengers on the one hand and how they guide the people, and these people over here who are the philosophers. Right? How do the philosophers, how do they speak about the world and about the things that they cannot see? They use what? They use what? Aql. They use reason. Right? So what these philosophers, what they did is they said that we want to have a rational understanding of the creator or the originator. Right? How can we rationally understand who is this being or this thing that we know is governing the universe? Right? And how can we acquire knowledge of him? Remember, these people are misguided people. There is no book sent to them. They are star worshippers. They are polytheists. They are idolaters. And they just use their aql to try to understand the world and to try to understand things that they cannot see. Right? And so they basically said, aql is the foundation of all knowledge. Is this true? Is this true? Is aql the foundation of knowledge about Allah? No, it's not. We've already established that it is wajib to know Allah by way of naql, wahi. Yes? We already established that. These people, the general principle they have is that it is it is basically the only sound basis of knowledge. The only way we can get sound knowledge is by using this. Right? And this is something which is said by all of the philosophers and disbelievers and atheists in all times and ages. They say the same thing. Like today, you have scientists and they say, yes, the scientific method and reason is the only route to knowledge. Is this correct? No. Batil. False. It's not correct. But this is the basic principle. This is the basic principle that they said. And so what they began to do is they began to speak about this being that they thought was behind the universe, right? And they started writing books called Physics and Metaphysics. Physics is things that we can see, and metaphysics is things that we can't see, and what is their nature and so on and so forth. So to cut a long story short, I'm going to summarize it. I'm going to mention to you how they described this being that they thought was behind the universe. I'm going to give you the summary of what they said, and pay attention to these words. So they said, and all of this is known and established. It's not subject to dispute. It's not something that I'm making up. It's rigorously studied. Their books are there. They are translated. There's academic papers on this. This is all known and understood. And really, the asharis and maturidis, the ones at the very top of the pyramid, they know exactly what is being said here. They know and understand what is being said here, and they know this full well. Right? But the ones who are underneath, in the middle layer of the pyramid, and the blind followers at the bottom, they are basically clueless about all of this. They don't know any of this. Right? But the ones right at the top, they know, when they hear this speech, they will know that we know what they are upon and what they're about. Right? So, listen to the speech of Aristotle and Plato, how they are describing the divine, meaning that being that they believe is behind the universe. They say, he is without a body. Without a body. Doesn't have a body. He doesn't, without limit. Doesn't have any limits. He is without change. He cannot change. He does not have mutability. He's immutable. What does this mean? That he can't change. He's fixed. He is without parts. He's not divisible. He doesn't have any parts. He is not subject to time. He's not confined by time, confined by space. Can you start to understand this language now? Do you understand this language? Because this language is what you will see in the books of the Ash'aris and Maturidis. This is where it's coming from, right? It's coming from that source. So we'll make the link later on, inshallah ta'ala. So they're saying this being is without a body, he's without parts, and he's without passions. By passions they mean things like loving and being pleased and being angry and things like this. So basically, these Greek philosophers, this is their language in terms of how they described the being that they thought was behind the universe. Right? He's not confined by space, not confined by time, he's not a body, he's not divisible, he's not this, he doesn't have any attributes, we can't think of an attribute in our mind for him. Do you understand? All of this, basically, if you think about it, they are rejecting any description for Allah, and they are saying that really it's just something that you think of in your mind, that He is one. Right? Without any names, without any attributes, and so this is the type of language that these people basically spoke of. Now this is in the 4th century before Isa alayhi salam. Right? 4 centuries before Isa alayhi salam. Aristotle, Plato were in that basic period of time. So then what happened is that this idea or this speech and this language of Plato and Aristotle, the Jews and the Christians and the Sabi'ah, they acquired this language and they acquired these ideas and they began to speak about Allah in exactly the same way. So meaning that this type of knowledge, this type of language is something that the previous nations fell into before the people of Islam fell into it. Right? So meaning that the people like the Ash'aris and Maturidis and the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila, they are not something new among the nations. This is something which already happened to the Jews. It happened to the Christians and it happened to the Sabi'ah. And these things that we are speaking of about ta'wil and tafweed and so on and so forth, which are these mechanisms, this is not something new. This already existed amongst the Jews and amongst the Christians many hundreds of years before Islam even came. And therefore, if you go and you research in the academic papers and in history books and so on and so forth, again, all of this is well known and established and clear. I will give you some names. For example, there was a Jewish rabbi by the name of Philo Judaeus of Alexandria, in Egypt, Alexandria. He died in the year 50 in the Christian era, meaning that he was alive in the time of Isa alayhi salam. And this man, in his books, when you read his books, you will find the same things and the same type of language that you will find today in the books of the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. Like, Allah is not a jism, Allah is not a body, Allah is not an Arab, Allah is not an accident or an incidental attribute, Allah is not in place, Allah is not in a location, Allah is not this, Allah is not that. This is what we call negative theology. You only describe Allah in negatives. You only say what He isn't rather than saying what He is. Because if you say what He is, you've likened Him to the creation. Do you understand the basic idea now? Right? So this is something that was already present amongst those Greeks, Plotinus and others like that. And so this Philo, he's speaking with the same language. 800 years, 700 years before Jahm bin Safwan, the Jahmiyyah, the Mu'tazila, the Kullabiyya, the Ash'ariyya, the Maturidiyya. Right? Then after him, you have amongst the Christians, they become affected by the same thing. There is Clement of Alexandria in the 3rd century after Isa alayhi salam, speaking exactly the same language. God is without parts, without a body, without, is not divisible, is not mutable, and so on and so forth. The same type of language. not a jism, not an arad, is not subject to hawadith. All of this philosophical babble, philosophical nonsense that they took from the Greek philosophers, right? So if you read his works, then you go and read, for example, the books of these asharis and maturidis, it's exactly the same language. Then you have after him a person called St. Augustine of Hippo, I believe, the place where he's from. Exactly the same thing. He's basically in the 5th century. This is only now 3 centuries before Islam. Exactly the same type of language, right? And this is because they were affected by those Greek philosophers who said we use reason to decide what the creator is and what he isn't. And then on the basis, and they are obviously just misguided polytheists and idol worshippers who are speaking upon ignorance, then the Jews took that, and the Christians took that, and the Sabi'ah, they took that as well. The Sabi'ah are basically people to whom Ibrahim al-Islam was sent, but they remained in those lands for centuries and centuries and centuries, and they were still present when Islam came. And they were present in the Muslim lands. So, now the point is, can you see the difference between what's over here? What's over here? It is wahi. Yes? Wahi through the prophets and messengers. What's over here? Huh? What is it built upon? Jahl. Jahl. The whisperings of the shayateen. Right? Speculation. Right? And all of this nonsense. Right? That was taken then by the nations. By the Yahud. By the Nasara. By the Sabi'ah. And this now was present amongst the people when Islam came. Is that clear to you? That these ideas were present. It's not something new. It was already there. And one of the famous Christian theologians was a man by the name of John of Damascus. He was present in the time of Islam. Right? John of Damascus. In Damascus. After 100 Hijrah. And this man had exactly the same speech. What you hear from the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila and the Asharis and the Maturidis. With respect to Allah's names and attributes, the same type of language, exactly the same. So the point being now, here we have the revelation which the Messenger has come with, and then we have those misguided polytheistic idol worshippers and star worshippers and what they came out with of that language. Then you have these nations who are affected by it, and they are now present. They are now present amongst the Muslims. Did you know that Yahudi who poisoned the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what's his name? What's his name? Labid bin al-A'sam al-Yahudi, the one who poisoned the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was a learned scholar, and you know what he said? He said the Torah is created. The Torah is created. He said this before the Mu'tazila came and said the Quran is created. Why did he say this? He said it on the basis of that same Greek philosophical baggage and babble that the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila acquired, and which then the Ash'aris and Maturidis then took after that. They came and they took the same thing. Right? So now maybe you've got a clearer picture now. You've got a clearer idea of what's going on. Right? The Messenger of Allah has come with revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal. And in the Quran there is Ithbat and Nafi. Ithbat is whatever Allah affirms for himself of names. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, and so on and so forth. And the attributes, his knowledge, his will, his power, his qudra, his face, his mercy, and so on and so forth. And then he negates from it, and likewise his actions of creating and ascending above the throne, and so on and so forth. And likewise he negates from himself all imperfections. This is the knowledge that we take from Allah Azza wa Jalla.